The taste of blood filled my mouth as I gasped awake, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. The steering wheel that had crushed my chest was gone. The shattered windshield that had painted my final moments in crimson had vanished. Instead, I found myself staring at a ceiling I hadn't seen in years. The water-stained tiles of my childhood bedroom, complete with the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck up there when I was 12. My trembling fingers found the University of Washington diploma on my nightstand, the ink still fresh, the date reading, May 15, 2019. 6 years. I had somehow traveled back 6 years to the very day that had set my entire downfall in motion. The day my parents would hand Ashley Chen, my adopted sister, their golden child, the internship opportunity that should have been mine. The day I would smile and congratulate her, swallowing my dreams like bitter medicine, just like I always did. But not this time. This time, I knew exactly how the story ended. I had lived through Ashley's manipulation, watched her steal my ideas and present them as her own, endured years of being called the disappointment while she basked in our parents' pride. I had died alone in that car accident, my phone showing 17 missed calls from debt collectors and not a single message from family asking where I was. Meanwhile, Ashley had just been announced as the youngest CEO in Morrison Industries history, standing beside our parents who beamed like she was their biological daughter instead of the girl they'd taken in from their friends after a tragic accident. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd died in a car accident too, just like Ashley's birth parents. But while their death had brought her everything, mine had brought me this. A second chance I never thought I'd get. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The smell of my mother's coffee drifted up from the kitchen, that same French roast blend she'd special ordered from Pike Place Market every month for as long as I could remember. In my previous life, I'd rushed downstairs that morning, diploma in hand, eager to share my excitement about finally graduating with my marketing degree. I'd had such plans then, such hope that this time, this accomplishment would finally make them see me the way they saw Ashley. How naive I'd been. I could hear them now, their voices carrying up through the thin floors of our Bellevue home. Dad's measured tone, the same one he used in meetings at Morrison Industries where he'd worked his way up to senior operations manager over 15 years. Mom's lighter laugh, the sound that had charmed her way into becoming head of human resources at the same company. They were probably discussing Ashley's future again, mapping out her trajectory like military strategists planning a campaign. Ashley, even thinking her name made my chest tighten with a familiar ache. 23 years old, business major and everything our parents had ever wanted in a daughter. Smart without being threatening, ambitious without being pushy, beautiful without being vain. She'd mastered the art of being perfect while making it look effortless, and I'd spent my entire life trying to figure out how to compete with a ghost, because that's what Ashley was, really. A ghost of the daughter our parents had lost when their best friends died in that crash 12 years ago. They'd taken her in without hesitation, and I'd been too young then to understand that saving Ashley meant there was no room left to save me from my own insecurities. In my first life, I'd tried so hard to be what they wanted. I'd switched majors 3 times, chasing their approval. Started in engineering because Dad mentioned how proud he was of Ashley's STEM aptitude, then moved to business when Ashley declared her major. Finally settling on marketing because it felt like the only space left that wasn't already claimed by her shadow. Even then, I'd chosen the University of Washington partly because Ashley had gone to Seattle University. Different schools, different circles, different chances to shine, but it hadn't mattered. Ashley had this gift for making everything she touched turn to gold, while I seemed cursed to tarnish everything I attempted. She'd graduated summa cum laude while I'd scraped by with a 3. She'd been president of 3 different clubs while I'd struggled to make friends. She'd secured a job offer from Morrison Industries before she'd even walked across the stage, while I'd spent months sending out resumes to companies that never called back. The worst part was that Ashley had never been cruel about it. She'd never rubbed her success in my face or deliberately sabotaged me, at least, not in ways I could prove. Her attacks were surgical, precise, designed to look like accidents or well-meaning advice, a suggestion that I might be more comfortable in a different role. A concerned comment about my delicate constitution, shared with our parents just loud enough for me to overhear. A helpful offer to review my presentation that somehow resulted in her ideas mysteriously appearing in the final version. She was brilliant at playing the loving sister while systematically dismantling my confidence, and our parents ate it up. They praised her compassion, her leadership skills, her natural ability to bring out the best in people. They never noticed that the best she brought out of me was usually my willingness to step aside and let her take center stage. I sat up in bed, my reflection catching in the mirror across the room, 25 years old again, but with the eyes of someone who'd lived to 30. The dark circles under my eyes were gone. Those had come later, after years of insomnia brought on by anxiety and disappointment. My hair was longer, healthier, before stress had started making it fall out in clumps. My skin was clear, unmarked by the worry lines that had carved themselves into my face as I'd watched opportunity after opportunity slip through my fingers. But it was my expression that struck me most. In my previous life, this version of Sarah Chen had been hopeful, determined, ready to take on the world with her shiny new degree and unlimited potential. This Sarah had believed that hard work and good intentions would be enough, that eventually her parents would see her worth, that Ashley's golden reign couldn't last forever. This Sarah had been an idiot. The new Sarah Chen, the one who'd clawed her way back from death itself, knew better. I knew that Ashley's success hadn't been built on talent alone. It had been constructed on a foundation of my failures, each one carefully orchestrated to make her shine brighter by comparison. I knew that our parents' love wasn't infinite, that there was only so much pride and attention to go around, and Ashley had claimed the lion's share by being everything I wasn't. Most importantly, I knew how the story ended. Ashley would become the youngest CEO in Morrison Industries history, not through her own merit, but by stealing ideas, manipulating situations, and riding the wave of our parents' connection. She'd marry Brandon Taylor, another ambitious climber who'd help her consolidate power while our parents convinced themselves they'd raised a visionary leader. Meanwhile, I'd struggle through a series of dead-end jobs, each rejection letter another confirmation that I wasn't good enough, smart enough, special enough to matter. I'd watch from the sidelines as Ashley revolutionized Morrison Industries, with strategies that sounded suspiciously familiar, because half of them had been mine, shared in confidence during late-night sister talks and then polished until they sparkled like diamonds in Ashley's presentation. The car accident had been almost a mercy in the end. A moment of inattention, a text from my landlord about overdue rent, the screech of brakes that came too late. At least it had been quick. At least I hadn't had to watch Ashley's inevitable wedding announcement, or hear our parents gush about their successful daughter while carefully avoiding mention of their other one. But now I had a choice to make. I could try to change everything. Fight Ashley head-on, expose her manipulations, demand the recognition I deserved. Or I could be smarter than that. I could let Ashley think she was winning while I played a completely different game. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted my thought. Light, quick steps that could only belong to Ashley. In my first life, she'd bounded into my room that morning with congratulations and excited chatter about our futures, her enthusiasm so genuine that I'd felt guilty for my flicker of resentment. Now I recognized it for what it had been, a performance designed to establish her role as the supportive sister while subtly gathering intelligence about my plans. A soft knock on my door, then Ashley's voice, warm and melodic as always. "Sarah, are you awake? I heard you moving around up there." I took a breath, centering myself. This was it, the first test of my new approach. In my previous life, I'd opened that door immediately, eager for connection, hungry for any scrap of sisterly affection. This time I made her wait. "Come in," I called, settling back against my pillows and arranging my expression into something that might pass for sleepy confusion. Ashley pushed open the door, and for a moment I was struck by how young she looked. 23, fresh-faced, with the kind of natural beauty that photographers spent fortunes trying to capture. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, and her smile was radiant enough to power half of Seattle. She was wearing one of her casual outfits, designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly food budget, and a silk blouse that somehow managed to look both professional and effortless. Our parents had always been generous with Ashley's wardrobe, justifying the expense as an investment in her future. Meanwhile, I'd learned to haunt thrift stores and clearance racks, developing an eye for hidden gems that Ashley had occasionally borrowed and somehow made look better than I ever had. "Congratulations, graduate." Ashley's voice bubbled with excitement as she perched on the edge of my bed. "I can't believe my big sister is finally done with college. You must be so relieved." The phrasing was perfect as always. Congratulations, but with the implication that I'd struggled to reach a finish line she'd crossed easily. Relief, not pride or accomplishment. Big sister used in a way that felt more like older than protective or accomplished. In my previous life, I'd missed all these subtle digs. Now they stood out like neon signs. "It feels surreal," I admitted, which was true enough. "Like I can't quite believe it's real." Ashley's smile widened, and she reached over to squeeze my hand. Her touch was warm, her grip firm and confident. "Well, it is real, and you should be proud. Marketing is such a challenging field, so competitive, but I know you'll find something perfect for you." Another masterpiece of backhanded encouragement, acknowledgement of difficulty paired with doubt about success, confidence that I'd find something but something perfect for me, which in Ashley speak meant suitable for someone of your limited ability. "Actually," I said carefully, "I was thinking about taking some time to figure out my next steps, maybe travel a little, do some freelance work, explore my options." I watched Ashley's face carefully as I delivered this news. In my previous life, I'd declared my intention to immediately start job hunting, to prove myself worthy of the Chen family name. Ashley had supported this plan enthusiastically, even offering to put in a good word for me at Morrison Industries, an offer that had somehow never materialized into actual introductions or opportunities. This time, I could see the wheels turning behind Ashley's eyes. If I wasn't actively competing for positions, if I was taking a step back from traditional career paths, that left more room for her to shine. Her relief was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It was almost visible, though she covered it quickly with concern. "Are you sure that's why?" she asked, tilting her head in a gesture that had always made our parents melt. "I mean, the job market is so competitive right now. Taking time off might make it harder to get back in later." "Maybe," I said with a shrug, "but I've been in school for 4 years straight. I think I've earned a little break." Ashley bit her lip, a tell I'd learned to recognize in my previous life. She was calculating, trying to figure out how to respond. Too much enthusiasm for my plan would seem suspicious. Too much discouragement might make me reconsider. "Well," she said finally, "you know what's best for you. And hey, if you change your mind, I might have some connections that could help. I start at Morrison Industries next month, and Dad's always saying how they're looking for fresh talent." There it was, the olive branch that wasn't really an olive branch. In my previous life, I'd jumped at this offer grateful for any lifeline. I'd spent weeks crafting the perfect resume, preparing for interviews that never came, following up on applications that disappeared into the void. It had taken me months to realize that Ashley had never actually submitted my materials to anyone who mattered. "That's really sweet of you to offer," I said, injecting just the right amount of gratitude into my voice. "I'll definitely keep that in mind." Ashley's smile brightened, and she leaned forward to hug me. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. I know this next chapter is going to be amazing." As her arms wrapped around me, I caught a whiff of her perfume, something expensive and sophisticated that our mother had bought her for her birthday. In my previous life, that scent had always made me feel underdressed and unsophisticated by comparison. Now it just smelled like calculation and ambition wrapped in French fragrance. "Thanks, Ash," I murmured into her shoulder. "That means a lot." She pulled back, her eyes bright with what looked like genuine affection. "Always, big sister. We're family, family." the word that had always been both a blessing and a curse in the Chen household. We were family, which meant we were supposed to support each other, root for each other's success, celebrate each other's victories, but we were also family, in the way that meant there could only be one favorite, one success story, one daughter who made our parents proud. Ashley had claimed that role so thoroughly that I'd never even realized I was competing for it, until it was too late. After Ashley left to shower and get ready for brunch, a family tradition our parents had instituted to celebrate major milestones, I remained in bed, staring at my diploma. The paper felt different now, lighter somehow. In my previous life, this degree had represented hope, potential, the key to proving myself worthy of love and respect. Now it was just paper, a prop in a much larger game. The real question was what game I wanted to play. I could expose Ashley, try to tear down the pedestal our parents had built for her, but that would make me the villain in their story, the jealous sister who couldn't stand to see Ashley succeed. I could try to outcompete her directly, fighting for the same opportunities and recognition, but Ashley had years of experience in this arena, and our parents' bias already tilted the field in her favor. Or I could do something Ashley would never I could let her win this round, let our parents choose her again, for the Morrison Industries opportunity, let her think she'd secured her path to success. Meanwhile, I could build something else entirely, something that would make her victory meaningless in the end. Because I had one advantage Ashley didn't know about. I knew the future. I knew which companies would fail and which would thrive. I knew which trends would take off and which would fizzle. I knew about the economic shifts coming, the technological advances, the social changes that would reshape entire industries. Most importantly, I knew about Morrison Industries' biggest weakness, the blind spot that would eventually threaten the entire company. James Morrison, the founder and CEO, was getting older and had no children of his own. He'd been looking for a successor for years, but had never found anyone who truly understood his vision for the company's future. In my previous life, Ashley had convinced him she was that person, but her leadership had been built on stolen ideas and manipulation, not genuine innovation. This time I could be the one with the real vision. This time I could build something that would make Ashley's position irrelevant. This time I could let our parents choose her while I chose to become someone they couldn't ignore. The smell of bacon drifted up from the kitchen, reminding me that family brunch would be starting soon. In my previous life, this meal had been a celebration of my graduation and a discussion of my future plans. Ashley had dominated the conversation, as always, talking about her upcoming start date at Morrison Industries, and her ideas for revolutionizing corporate communications strategy. I remembered now that several of those ideas had actually come from late-night conversations we'd had during my senior year when I'd shared my thoughts about social media marketing and digital transformation. Ashley had listened so carefully, asked such thoughtful questions, that I'd felt like finally someone in my family understood my perspective. It wasn't until months later, when I'd read about Morrison Industries' innovative new marketing campaigns in the Business Journal, that I'd realized my ideas had been repurposed and refined under Ashley's name. When I'd confronted her about it, she'd been genuinely confused, insisting that she'd mentioned my contributions to her supervisors, and couldn't understand why my name hadn't been included in the press coverage. That was Ashley's greatest talent, making you doubt your own perceptions, making you feel like you were being paranoid or ungrateful for questioning her motives. She'd learned to gaslight so subtly that even she might have believed her own explanations. But I wasn't that naive, Sarah, anymore. I was the Sarah who'd lived through the consequences of trusting Ashley's good intentions. I was the Sarah who'd died alone and unremembered while Ashley basked in stolen glory. This time I would be the one doing the playing. Downstairs, the Chen family dining room buzzed with the comfortable energy of Sunday morning traditions. The mahogany table that Dad had saved months to buy gleamed under Mom's carefully arranged centerpiece, fresh peonies from the garden she'd cultivated for 15 years. The good china, reserved for special occasions and holidays, caught the morning light streaming through windows that Mom religiously cleaned every weekend. This tableau of domestic perfection had once felt like home to me. Now I recognized it as another stage where Ashley performed her role as the ideal daughter while I fumbled through mine as the perpetual understudy. "There's our graduate," Dad's voice boomed as I descended the stairs, his face creasing into the smile he reserved for moments of genuine pride. David Chen at 52 still carried himself with the confidence that had served him well in his rise through Morrison Industries' ranks. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his weekend clothes pressed to crisp perfection. Even on his days off he maintained the professional appearance that had made him indispensable to James Morrison. Mom looked up from arranging fruit on a platter, her own smile warm but tinged with the careful assessment she'd perfected in her HR role. Linda Chen had mastered the art of reading people, of knowing exactly what motivated each individual employee under her supervision. The skill that made her invaluable at Morrison Industries had never quite translated to understanding her own daughter's complex relationship. "Sarah, honey, sit down." Mom gestured toward my usual spot at the table, the chair that somehow always ended up facing away from the best view, positioned where conversation flowed around rather than through me. "Ashley was just telling us about her orientation schedule at Morris." Ashley beamed from her seat at Dad's right hand, the position of honor she'd claimed so naturally that no one ever questioned it. "They're starting me in strategic development, reporting directly to Janet Holbrook. She's James Morrison's right hand." Apparently he specifically requested someone young and innovative for their digital transformation initiative. I slid into my designated chair and reached for the orange juice, letting the familiar dynamics wash over me. In my previous life, this announcement had hit me like a physical blow. Strategic development was exactly the kind of role I'd dreamed of, the perfect blend of creativity and business analysis that matched my marketing background. But I'd smiled and congratulated Ashley, swallowing my disappointment like bitter medicine. This time I simply nodded and buttered my toast. "That sounds amazing, Ash. You'll be perfect for it." The words tasted different now, not bitter with suppressed jealousy, but strategic with hidden knowledge. Because I knew something Ashley didn't. Janet Holbrook would be leaving Morrison Industries in 8 months to start her own consulting firm. The strategic development department would be restructured, and Ashley's carefully planned trajectory would hit its first major obstacle when she found herself reporting to Marcus Webb, a dinosaur who believed innovation meant switching from fax machines to email. "I'm just so grateful for the opportunity," Ashley continued, her voice pitched perfectly to convey humble enthusiasm. "Dad, I know having your recommendation carried weight, but I promise I'll prove myself on merit alone." Dad's chest puffed with pride, Ashley's being modest. "James Morrison told me personally that her interview was the best they'd had in years. Said she had insights about the future of business that reminded him of himself at her age." The future of business. I nearly choked on my orange juice, remembering where some of those insights had originated. Late-night conversations during Ashley's senior year, when she'd pump me for information about digital marketing trends, social media strategies and consumer behavior patterns I'd studied in my coursework. She'd been so interested, so engaged, asking follow-up questions that made me feel like my opinions actually mattered. Now I understood she'd been conducting market research, mining my knowledge for golden nuggets she could polish and present as her own brilliance. "Speaking of the future," Mom said, turning her attention to me with the careful tone she used for difficult conversations, "have you given any more thought to your plans, Sarah? I know you mentioned wanting to take some time, but your father and I have been talking." Here it came, the conversation that had derailed my confidence for months in my previous life, the gentle but persistent pressure to be more like Ashley, to show the same drive and ambition, to stop wasting the opportunities that life had given me. "Actually," I said, setting down my orange juice with deliberate calm, "I've been thinking about starting my own business." The words dropped into the breakfast conversation like a stone into still water. Ashley's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Dad's coffee cup froze against his lip. Mom's smile became fixed in place, the expression she wore when trying to process unexpected information. "Your own business," Dad repeated slowly, as if testing the words for hidden meaning. "What kind of business?" I'd spent the past hour in my room crafting this moment, choosing my words as carefully as a chess master planning an opening gambit. In my previous life, I'd never had the courage to voice such ambitious dreams. I'd always positioned my goals in relation to others, wanting a job like Ashley's, hoping to work for a company like Morrison Industries, dreaming of achieving success similar to what our parents had built. This time I was claiming something entirely different. This time I was claiming independence. "Digital marketing consulting," I said, meeting Dad's surprised gaze steadily.
Small businesses are struggling to adapt to social media and online marketing. Most of them can't afford big agencies, but they need help navigating the digital landscape. I think there's a real opportunity to bridge that gap. Ashley recovered first, her smile sliding back into place like a well-rehearsed performance. That's so entrepreneurial of you, Sarah. Though isn't that market pretty saturated? I mean, everyone's calling themselves a digital marketing expert these days. The dismissal was wrapped in concern, delivered with just the right tone of sisterly words. In my previous life, comments like this had sent me spiraling into self-doubt, second-guessing every instinct and idea, until I'd talked myself out of taking any risks at all. Now I simply shrugged. Maybe, but I've done my research, and I think I have a unique perspective to offer. Besides, worst case scenario, I fail and have to get a regular job. Best case, I build something meaningful. But honey, Mom interjected gently, starting a business is so risky, especially in such a competitive field. Wouldn't it be better to get some experience first? Build your resume, learn from established professionals. The subtext was clear. Be more like Ashley, who'd chosen the safe path, the approved path, the path that led to steady paychecks and parental pride. In my previous life, this suggestion had felt like wisdom. Why take unnecessary risks when there were proven formulas for success? Now I recognized it as the voice of fear dressed up as practicality. My parents had built comfortable lives by playing it safe, by working hard within existing systems, by proving themselves valuable to people who held power rather than claiming power for themselves. It had served them well, but it had also taught them to view ambition with suspicion and independence with concern. I appreciate the advice, I said carefully, but I think this is something I need to try. I've saved some money from my part-time jobs, and I have a few potential clients already lined up. This was a lie, but a strategic one. In my previous life, I'd been too honest about my uncertainties, too willing to expose my vulnerabilities to people who would use them against me. This time, I was projecting confidence, even when I felt anything but certain. Ashley leaned forward, her expression brightening with what looked like genuine interest. Really? Who are your potential clients? Maybe I could help you network once I'm established at Morris. We're always looking for reliable vendors for smaller projects. The offer sounded generous, supportive, exactly the kind of sisterly assistance that would make our parents beam with pride at Ashley's thoughtfulness. But I heard the calculation underneath. By positioning herself as my potential benefactor, Ashley was establishing a hierarchy where I would be dependent on her goodwill for success. Any achievements I managed would be attributed partly to her assistance. Any failures would reflect my inability to capitalize on the opportunities she generously provided. It was masterful manipulation disguised as family loyalty. That's really sweet of you to offer, I replied, but I want to build this on my own merit. If I'm going to succeed or fail, I want it to be based on my own abilities. For just a moment, Ashley's mask slipped. Her eyes flashed with something that might have been irritation or calculation before the bright smile returned. Of course, I totally understand wanting to prove yourself independently. I just want you to know the offer's there if you change your mind. Dad cleared his throat, his expression thoughtful. Sarah, I admire your ambition, I really do.
But have you thought about the practical aspects? Health insurance, steady income, building toward retirement? These things matter more than you might realize at your age. The concern was genuine, rooted in his own experience of working steadily toward security and stability. David Chen had climbed Morrison Industries' corporate ladder, one careful rung at a time, proving his value through dedication and reliability rather than flashy innovation. The approach had served him well, earned him respect and a comfortable lifestyle for his family, but it had also made him risk-averse, suspicious of anything that looked like gambling with financial security. In his worldview, businesses were built by other people, visionaries like James Morrison who had the capital and connections to survive the inevitable setbacks. Regular people like the Chens were meant to find their place within those structures, to build careers rather than companies. I've thought about all of that, I said. I'm not going to quit everything and throw caution to the wind. I'll start small, build gradually, keep my expenses low. If it doesn't work out in a year or two, I'll pivot to something more traditional. A year or two, Mom repeated faintly. Sarah, that's a long time to be unsettled. What if you meet someone you want to settle down with? What if you want to buy a house, start a family? It's harder to do those things when your income is unpredictable. The future she was describing, marriage, mortgage, children, felt like a script written by someone else, a life path that had been laid out for me without consulting my actual desires or dreams. In my previous life, I'd accepted this vision because it felt safer than risking rejection by wanting something different. I'd spent years waiting for someone to choose me, validate me, give my life meaning through their approval. That approach had left me dying alone in a car wreck, unmourned and unremembered. Those are all important considerations, I acknowledged, but they're also not urgent right now. I'm 25, not 35. I have time to take some risks and see what happens. Ashley's laugh tinkled like wind chimes, light and musical and perfectly pitched to sound supportive rather than mocking. Sarah's always been the adventurous one in the family. Remember when she wanted to backpack through Europe instead of doing a summer internship? I did remember. I also remembered how Ashley had helped me research the trip, encouraged my plans, even offered to help me save money for it, right up until the moment she'd casually mentioned to our parents that she was concerned about my safety, traveling alone, that she'd read alarming statistics about young women abroad, that maybe it would be better to wait until I was older and more experienced. By the time Ashley's concerns had worked their way through the family conversation, my European adventure had been transformed into a reckless fantasy that proved I wasn't ready for real-world responsibility. I'd ended up taking a summer job, filing paperwork at Dad's friend's insurance agency instead, earning money while Ashley completed a prestigious internship at a tech startup that had since been acquired for millions. This is different, I said firmly. This isn't about adventure or rebellion. It's about building something meaningful with skills I've actually developed. Of course it is, Ashley agreed quickly. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I think it's wonderful that you're thinking creatively about your career. Not everyone is cut out for traditional corporate life. The phrasing was perfect, supportive enough to deflect criticism, but with subtle implications that my choice represented a limitation rather than an expansion of possibility. Traditional corporate life, the path Ashley had chosen, was positioned as the challenging route that required special qualities, while my entrepreneurial plans were relegated to the category of alternative options for people who couldn't handle the demands of real business. Dad was nodding thoughtfully, already integrating Ashley's perspective into his own analysis. Maybe it would be good for you to explore different approaches, Sarah. Figure out what really suits your personality and strengths. The patronizing undertone stung, but I kept my expression neutral. In my previous life, I would have tried to justify my choice, to prove that I was just as capable of succeeding in corporate environments as Ashley. I would have spent the entire meal defending my decision until I'd talked myself out of believing in it. This time, I simply smiled and reached for another piece of toast. Exactly. I want to understand what I'm really good at before I commit to any particular path. The conversation moved on to safer topics. Dad's latest project at Morrison Industries, Mom's ongoing battles with the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, Ashley's plans to redecorate her apartment. I participated just enough to avoid seeming sullen or withdrawn, but mostly I observed. I watched Ashley seamlessly guide the discussion toward subjects that showcased her achievements and insights. I noticed how our parents' attention naturally gravitated toward her opinions and observations. I saw the subtle ways she positioned herself as the family's rising star, while maintaining the appearance of modest humility. In my previous life, these dynamics had been invisible to me, as natural as breathing. I'd accepted my role as the supportive audience for Ashley's performances, never questioning why conversations seemed to orbit around her experiences, while mine were politely acknowledged and quickly dismissed. Now I could see the entire production with crystal clarity. Ashley didn't dominate through force or obvious manipulation. She simply made herself indispensable to our parents' vision of family success. She was their proof that they'd raised a daughter capable of achieving great things, their validation that all their sacrifices and efforts had been worthwhile. I had never served that function. I'd been the practice child, the rough draft, the daughter who helped them figure out what kind of parenting produced excellence so they could apply those lessons to Ashley. The realization should have hurt, but instead, it felt liberating. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to compete for a position that had never been available to me. I wasn't begging for recognition from people who'd already decided I wasn't worthy of it. I was simply Sarah, you're being awfully quiet, Mom observed as Ashley finished describing her plans to join Morrison Industries' Young Professionals Network. Everything okay? Just thinking, I replied honestly, processing everything. Ashley reached across the table to squeeze my hand, her touch warm and seemingly affectionate. It's a lot, isn't it? Graduating, making big life decisions. I remember feeling so overwhelmed when I was figuring out my path. The sympathy was expertly delivered, acknowledging my struggles while subtly emphasizing that Ashley had successfully navigated similar challenges. She'd managed to position herself as both peer and mentor, someone who understood my difficulties because she'd transcended them. You'll figure it out, she continued. You always do. And remember, you've got all of us cheering you on, all of us. The phrase created an image of unified family support, but the reality was more complex. Ashley had our parents' unconditional confidence in her judgment, which meant her assessment of my prospects would carry significant weight in family discussions. If she decided I was making a mistake, her concerns would amplify their existing words. If she chose to support my decision publicly while undermining it privately, her influence could sabotage my efforts without leaving fingerprints. In my previous life, I'd been grateful for Ashley's attention and advice, never recognizing how much power I was handing her over my own narrative. This time I understood that her interest in my plans wasn't entirely benevolent. Ashley needed to know what I was doing so she could calculate how it might affect her own position, adjust her strategies accordingly, and maintain her role as the family's primary success story. Thanks, I said simply. That means a lot. After brunch, I retreated to my room while Ashley and our parents continued their discussion of her upcoming transition into the professional world. Through my closed door, I could hear the excited buzz of their conversation, the planning and strategizing that accompanied any major milestone in Ashley's life. In my previous life, being excluded from these discussions had felt like punishment, confirmation that I wasn't important enough to include in family planning sessions. Now I recognized the exclusion as a gift. While they focused on Ashley's trajectory, I was free to pursue my own plans without constant scrutiny or advice. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document, ready to begin the real work. In my previous life, I'd talked about starting a business for months without ever taking concrete action. I'd researched and planned and second-guessed myself into paralysis, waiting for the perfect moment and the ideal circumstances that never came. This time I had something my previous self had lacked: certainty. I knew which companies would fail and which would thrive. I knew which social media platforms would explode in popularity and which would fade into irrelevance. I knew which marketing strategies would prove effective and which would become obsolete. More importantly, I knew about Morrison Industries' hidden vulnerability. James Morrison was approaching retirement age, but he'd been reluctant to name a successor because none of the obvious candidates truly understood his vision for the company's future. In my previous life, Ashley had eventually convinced him she was that person, but her leadership had been built on stolen ideas and surface-level understanding, rather than genuine innovation. This time I could be the one with real insight. This time I could build expertise and credibility independent of Ashley's influence. This time, when James Morrison went looking for his successor, I could be a candidate he'd never considered but couldn't ignore. The plan was ambitious, probably impossible, definitely risky, but it was mine in a way that no corporate job could ever be. Success or failure, I would own the results completely. I started typing, outlining the business plan that would become my weapon in the war. Ashley didn't even know we were fighting. Part 3. Antagonist's current manipulation. 3 weeks after my graduation brunch, I was deep in the process of building my consulting business when Ashley texted me about coffee. The message arrived at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, perfectly timed to catch me during what she'd correctly assumed would be a lull in my day. "Hey, free for coffee around 4? I'm downtown and thought we could catch up. I have some exciting news to share." The exclamation points were classic Ashley, enthusiastic enough to seem genuine, but not so over the top as to appear calculated. In my previous life, I would have dropped everything to meet her, eager for any sisterly bonding time and curious about her news. Now I recognized the timing for what it was: strategic. Ashley was 3 weeks into her position at Morrison Industries, exactly the point where initial orientation ended and real work began. She'd be settling into her role, figuring out the office dynamics, and starting to understand the challenges ahead. It was also exactly the point where she'd be looking for intelligence about my activities, checking to see if my business plans posed any threat to her position as the family's rising star. I agreed to meet her at Victrola on Capitol Hill, a coffee shop I'd discovered during my college years but had never shared with Ashley. In my previous life, I'd always suggested places Ashley knew and liked, unconsciously deferring to her preferences even in small decisions. This time, I chose territory that felt like mine. Ashley arrived exactly on time, looking every inch the young professional in a tailored blazer and designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd always had an instinct for dressing the part, understanding that appearance could be just as important as performance in establishing credibility. "Sarah!" She embraced me warmly, the kind of hug that looked affectionate to anyone watching but felt performative to the person receiving it. "You look great. The entrepreneurial life obviously agrees with you." I'd chosen my outfit carefully: jeans and a vintage blouse that looked put together without trying too hard. In my previous life, meeting Ashley had always triggered a crisis of self-doubt about my appearance, leading to outfit changes and careful makeup application that never quite achieved the effortless polish she radiated naturally. This time, I'd dressed for comfort and confidence, knowing that trying to compete with Ashley on her terms was a losing game. "Thanks," I said, gesturing toward a table by the window. "How's the new job?" "Mom said you're loving it." Ashley's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm, or what looked like genuine enthusiasm. With Ashley, the line between authentic emotion and strategic performance was often impossible to distinguish, even for me. "It's incredible," she gushed as we settled into our seat. "Everyone at Morrison Industries is so brilliant and innovative. I'm learning something new every day." She launched into a detailed description of her first few weeks, painting a picture of a dynamic workplace full of creative challenges and supportive mentors. The way she told it, Morrison Industries was a perfect blend of established stability and cutting-edge thinking, exactly the kind of environment where a bright young professional could thrive. I listened with the part of my brain that had always been susceptible to Ashley's enthusiasm, the part that wanted to believe in her success stories and vicarious achievement. But another part of me, the part that had lived through the consequences of trusting Ashley's narratives, was analyzing every word for hidden meanings and strategic implications. "That's wonderful," I said when she paused for breath. "It sounds like exactly the kind of opportunity you were hoping for." "It really is," Ashley agreed, then leaned forward with the expression she wore when she was about to share something confidential. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Janet Holbrook, my supervisor, mentioned that they're looking for freelance marketing consultants for some smaller projects. Nothing huge, but it could be perfect for someone just starting out." There it was. The offer that wasn't really an offer, the opportunity that came with invisible strings attached. In my previous life, I would have been thrilled by this news, grateful that Ashley was thinking of me, and eager to prove myself worthy of Morrison Industries' attention. Now I could see the trap hidden beneath the generosity. If I accepted Ashley's referral, any success I achieved would be attributed to her connections and good judgment. If I failed, it would confirm that I wasn't ready for professional challenge. Either way, Ashley would position herself as the sister who'd tried to help me succeed, reinforcing her role as the responsible one looking out for her less capable sibling. "That's really thoughtful of you," I said carefully. "What kind of projects are they looking for help with?" Ashley's smile widened, clearly pleased by my interest. "Mostly social media strategy for their smaller clients. Companies that can't afford their full-service packages but still need digital marketing support." Janet said, It would be perfect for someone with fresh ideas who understands the latest trends. The description was carefully crafted to sound appealing while subtly establishing limitations. These weren't prestigious projects or high-profile clients. They were the overflow work that Morrison Industries' regular team didn't have time for, the kind of assignments that could provide experience but wouldn't lead to major career breakthroughs. It sounds interesting, I said, though I'm not sure if I'm ready to take on corporate clients yet. I've been focusing on building relationships with local small businesses first. This was partially true. I had reached out to several small business owners in the past few weeks, offering free consultations to understand their challenges and demonstrate my expertise. But I'd also been doing something Ashley didn't know about, researching Morrison Industries' client base and identifying opportunities that the company's traditional approach might be missing. Ashley's expression flickered slightly, a micro-expression of surprise or disappointment that she quickly covered with understanding. Of course, that makes total sense. Starting small is probably the smart approach. I just thought, well, Morrison Industries could be such a great reference if things went well. The implication was clear. By turning down her referral, I was potentially limiting my future opportunities with one of Seattle's most respected consulting firms. In Ashley's worldview, saying no to her help was essentially saying no to success. I really appreciate you thinking of me, I said. Maybe once I've built up a little more experience and confidence, it would be worth revisiting. Absolutely, Ashley agreed, but I could see her mentally filing this information away. My reluctance to accept her assistance would be reframed as evidence of my self-doubt or stubbornness, another data point in the narrative that positioned me as the sister who made things unnecessarily difficult for herself. She shifted gears smoothly, moving from professional topics to family updates. Mom mentioned you've been pretty busy with your business planning. How's that going? The question sounded casual sisterly interest in my activity, but I recognized it as intelligence gathering. Ashley's attempt to gauge how seriously I was taking my entrepreneurial plans and whether they posed any threat to her own trajectory. It's going well, I said vaguely. Lots of research and planning, building relationships, figuring out the market. That's so smart, Ashley said warmly. Really understanding your customers before you start selling to them. I've been learning so much about market research at Morrison Industries. It's fascinating how much strategy goes into understanding consumer behavior. She launched into an explanation of market research methodologies that sounded suspiciously familiar. As she talked about focus groups and demographic analysis, I realized she was essentially parroting back concepts I'd discussed with her during my senior year, when I'd been working on a consumer behavior project that had earned top marks in my marketing strategy class. In my previous life, I would have been flattered that Ashley remembered our conversations and impressed by her quick grasp of complex concepts. Now I understood that she wasn't demonstrating comprehension. She was establishing ownership. By presenting these ideas as insights she'd gained at Morrison Industries, Ashley was retroactively claiming credit for knowledge that had originated with me. Those are really interesting points, I said when she finished. It sounds like Morrison Industries has some sophisticated approaches to market analysis. Ashley beamed at the compliment, clearly pleased to be recognized as someone with access to advanced business knowledge. They really do. Sometimes I can't believe how much I'm learning. It makes me appreciate how much I didn't know when I was in school. The humble brag was perfectly executed, acknowledging her previous limitations while emphasizing her current access to superior information. In Ashley's narrative, college had been preparation for the real learning that happened in professional environments like Morrison Industries. Have you given any thought to getting some formal business training? She asked, tilting her head with an expression of gentle concern. I know you're brilliant with creative strategies, but there's so much about finance and operations and legal requirements. Maybe some business courses could help fill in the gaps. The suggestion was presented as helpful advice, but I heard the subtext clearly. Ashley was positioning my marketing degree as insufficient preparation for business ownership, implying that I lacked the comprehensive knowledge required for entrepreneurial success. Her own business degree, by contrast, had provided her with the foundational skills necessary for professional achievement. I've thought about it, I said. Right now I'm focused on getting practical experience, but additional education is definitely something I might pursue down the road. Of course, Ashley agreed. Hands-on experience is so valuable. Though I have to say, working at Morrison Industries has made me realize how much I didn't understand about business strategy when I was in school. It's like getting an MBA in real-world application. Another subtle dig, comparing her prestigious corporate experience to my scrappy entrepreneurial efforts. In Ashley's framework, she was receiving professional-grade education while I was essentially playing at business ownership without proper preparation. I sipped my coffee and nodded thoughtfully, giving no indication that her comments were landing with their intended impact. In my previous life, conversations like this had left me feeling inadequate and uncertain, questioning my decisions and abilities until I'd talked myself out of taking risks. This time I was simply collecting information about Ashley's strategy and mindset. Her need to establish superiority over my choices told me she was already feeling threatened by my independence, even though my business was still in its earliest stages. "You know," Ashley said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied expression, "I'm just so grateful that we both found paths that suit our personalities. You've always been more of a creative, free spirit type, and I've always been drawn to structure and strategy. It's like we complement each other perfectly." The categorization was expertly delivered, dividing our approaches into complementary but hierarchical categories. Ashley's structure and strategy carried implicit weight and importance, while my creative, free spirit approach was positioned as charming but ultimately less substantial. In previous conversations, Ashley had refined this technique until it felt natural and affectionate. She'd learned to define my strengths in ways that simultaneously limited their perceived value, creating a framework where my achievements could be acknowledged without threatening her position as the family's primary success story. "We do have different approaches," I agreed, mild. "I think that's probably healthy for both of us." Ashley's smile faltered slightly, as if she'd expected more engagement with her framework or more gratitude for her analysis of our respective strengths. My neutral response didn't give her material to work with, didn't provide openings for further categorization or advice. "Absolutely," she said after a moment. "Diversity of thinking is so important, especially in family. Dad was just saying how proud he is that we're both pursuing our passions in our own ways." The casual reference to Dad's approval was another strategic move, positioning Ashley as someone who had insider access to our parents' private thoughts and feelings. In my previous life, comments like this had made me anxious about my standing in the family, wondering what our parents really thought about my choices when I wasn't around to hear their discussion. Now I simply nodded and checked my phone, subtly indicating that our coffee date was approaching its natural conclusion. "I should probably head out soon. I have a call scheduled with a potential client." "Of course," Ashley's enthusiasm returned immediately. "I don't want to keep you from important business. It's so exciting that you're already getting client interest." The praise felt genuine, but I'd learned to distrust Ashley's enthusiasm when it came too easily. In my previous life, she'd been most supportive of my efforts when they posed the least threat to her own success, most encouraging when my goals were safely contained within boundaries that didn't challenge her position. As we gathered our things and prepared to leave, Ashley reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I almost forgot, I brought you something. Just a little good luck gift for your new business." I accepted the gift with surprise that was only partially feigned. Ashley had always been thoughtful about presents, choosing items that seemed perfectly suited to the recipient while somehow reinforcing her own superior taste and thoughtfulness. Inside the elegant wrapping was a leather-bound planner, expensive and beautiful, with my initials embossed in gold on the cover, the kind of accessory that looked professional and organized, exactly what a serious entrepreneur might carry to client meetings. "Ashley, this is gorgeous," I said, running my fingers over the smooth leather. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to," she replied warmly. "I saw it and immediately thought of you. I know how important organization will be as your business grows, and I wanted you to have something that would make you feel confident and professional." The gift was perfectly chosen, thoughtful and practical, and obviously expensive. It was also, I realized, a subtle form of image management. By giving me a high-quality planner, Ashley was encouraging me to see myself as someone who needed external tools to achieve organization and professionalism, qualities that came naturally to her, but required assistance for me. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "This is really thoughtful." Ashley's smile was radiant, clearly pleased by my reaction. "I'm just so excited for you, Sarah. I know this business is going to be amazing,
and I want to support you however I can. As we hugged goodbye outside the coffee shop, I felt the familiar confusion that Ashley's attention always created. Her gift was genuinely lovely, her enthusiasm seemed authentic, and her offers of help appeared generous. If I hadn't lived through the consequences of trusting Ashley's support, I might have been touched by her sisterly concern. Instead, I recognized the entire interaction as a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Ashley had positioned herself as my benefactor and advisor, gathered intelligence about my business plans, established frameworks that limited my potential impact, and reinforced our parents' likely concerns about my unconventional choices. Most importantly, she'd done it all while appearing to be nothing but loving and supportive, ensuring that any complaints about her behavior would make me look ungrateful and paranoid. Walking back to my apartment, I clutched the beautiful planner and wondered how many other gifts in my life had come with invisible strings attached. How many conversations had I failed to recognize as strategic rather than spontaneous? How many times had Ashley shaped my self-perception while I'd been grateful for her attention? This time, I would be the one doing the shaping. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.